I'm Lu Yan from Beijing Review Magazine, and this is the Governance Podcast, a podcast that explores the past, present, and future of governance in China as it works toward meeting its development goals and finds its place in the global community. Is the party above the law? President Xi Jinping has addressed this question several times as it's a question that he believes must be answered clearly. The Communist Party of China, or the CPC, is set out in the Constitution as the country's governing party. Leadership by the CPC is described in the Chinese Constitution as the defining feature of socialism with Chinese characteristics. President Xi attaches such importance to providing answers on that question because the external rhetoric, particularly in the West, is often that because the party's leadership is legally ensured, the party is above the law. According to Xi, not only are the party's actions and those of its individual members held accountable to the law, they are also held to a higher standard by the party's own set of rules. President Xi has said that China's laws embody the will of the party and the people, and the party acts in accordance with the law. Since he became the top leader of the party in 2012 and president of China in 2013, one of Xi's major priorities has been increasing the party and its members' compliance with the law, particularly to ensure they are leading by example. Joining me for this episode of the Governance Podcast are Xia Lu, a research fellow focusing on the party's leadership with the National Academy of Development and Strategy at Renmin University of China. Xia holds a PhD in politics from the University of Hong Kong. Also joining us, Angelo Falsone, a lecturer at the School of Law and Economics at Zhongnan University of Economics and Law, with expertise in comparative law and legal history. Xia Lu and Angelo Falsone will share their insights into President Xi's theories and how the rule of law works in China. Hi, Xia Lu. Thank you for joining our podcast. Let's begin with this question. Why is it important for societies to pursue the rule of law?
Thank you very much for the question. So the rule of law is the opposite of arbitrary rule. Therefore, it is a value in itself, independent of the content of the law and other legal documents. It gives citizens and other economic actors, like corporations and other kind of stuff, a basic certainty in their interaction with others and with the government. Without this certainty, it is difficult to imagine that individuals and corporations will be able to develop their potential and that economy will thrive and society will remain stable. This presupposes that the government does not only rule through law, but also according to law. The rule of law is not established as long as the government may use its power at will. By adopting the rule of law, the government is committed to not only to pursuing its ends by using legal means, but also adhering to the legal rules itself. Therefore, the rule of law is identical with the concept of limited government. But this certainty does not necessarily mean that the law must always remain the same or remain, unchanged. As social life is in constant change and modern science and technology constantly create new opportunities as well as new risks, it is inevitable that the law which undertakes to regulate development changes as well. The law should change according to the real condition. But the rule of law guarantees that this change occurs in the legal way, and at least in principle, it will change for the future and not retroactively. The law is binding not only for private, but also for public actors, the government included. It is a requirement of the rule of law that state acts can be reviewed for conformity with the law. Only if this is guaranteed does the rule of law fulfill its promise to stabilize expectation, make state behavior predictable, and create the degree of certainty on which social development depends.
What are President Xi's main ideas on China's rule of law?
Since the 18th CPC National Congress in 2012, the CPC has put the rule of law high on its strategic agenda and has put forward new ideas and new strategies, giving shape to Xi Jinping thought on the rule of law. President Xi emphasizes the importance of China's socialist rule of law being led by the CPC and sees that as the biggest difference between Chinese and Western rule of law. The CPC, the party, leads the people in enacting and enforcing the Constitution and other laws, and the party itself is required to act within the confines of these laws. The government is expected to administer the country in accordance with the law. Additionally, efforts will be made to ensure sound legislation, strict law enforcement, impartial administration of justice, and society-wide observance of the law, and to ensure that all work of the state is carried out under the rule of law. And this is aimed at protecting the people's rights and interests. President Xi also calls for rule-based governance of the party so that the party can better live up to its role as the country's governing party. The CPC has put in place a body of rules and regulations which hold party members to a higher standard than that exists in the country's laws.
What are the similarities and differences between the rule of law in China and in Western countries like the US?
As I said before, both China and the US count on the rule of law to create certainty needed for individual and social development, but there are differences in their histories and functions. The rule of law has a history of more than 200 years in the US and more than 800 years in the UK. However, in China has practiced the rule of law for only a little over 100 years since the end of the dynastic era or imperial era. The marriage law of 1950s was the first law adopted after the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949. And the PRC's first constitution was born in 1954. And the criminal law was not adopted until 1979. So obviously, the practice in the West has become more mature, while China is still on the way to becoming a law-based country, a law-based society. In terms of function, the US practices the separation of powers with checks and balances between legislative, executive, and the judiciary branches. However, in China, the National People's Congresses, the NPC, is the highest state organ of power. In addition to being vested by Constitution wide-ranging powers, including enacting laws and electing leaders, it also stands above the administrative and other branches of government, as well as the judiciary. The party exercises leadership over the state organ through the NPC and People's Congresses at other local levels, so local people congresses, all of which consist of elected deputies. Specifically, through legal procedures at People's Congresses at different levels of the People's Congresses, including national level and local level, candidates nominated by the party become leaders of the state institutions, including courts and procuratorates, which mainly deal with public prosecution and the supervision of a criminal investigation. China's courts are required by the Constitution to work independently without being influenced by administrative power. Party and government officials are prohibited from interfering in judicial proceedings. Authorities leading or overseeing judicial work may inquire about the handling of cases and ensure judicial body are properly fulfilling their duties, but must not influence any decisions on specific issues such as evidence admission and the issuance of judgments. So you could say China's legal system is still developing and requires the guidance of the party, which is the guiding force behind all aspects of China's development.
Angelo, you have studied law in both the US and Europe, and now teach it in China. Could you please share with us some of your thoughts on how the rule of law compares between them?
When we talk about law in different countries, we always have to consider how law is deeply rooted in the social fabric and the history of a specific place. I would like to highlight 3 points that can give an idea about some differences and similarities, avoiding legal technicalities. The first one is related to the origin of the expression rule of law. The core idea of the rule of law can be traced back to Plato and Aristotle. In fact, although the US Constitution and its amendments are formally silent about the rule of law, the idea has always been implied within American constitutional law. The fact that some Western constitutions do not include the expression rule of law might have little importance nowadays. Indeed, this concept belongs to international law and it's deeply supported by the United Nations. For instance, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948 refers to the concept in question. My second point is related to the separation of powers. It is well known that till recent years there was a kind of weak separation of powers in Britain. For example, a part of the House of Lords was the court of last resort till 2009, when the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom was established. On the other hand, also for historical reasons, US law emphasizes a lot the principle of separation of powers. Consequently, it is important to understand that this concept can vary a lot through time and space, without necessarily undermining the credibility of the rule of law. My last point focuses on the accessibility to the law. In the US, since 1970s, we have had the so-called plain English movement that highlighted the necessity of a clearer legal language, both in statutes and other legal instruments. The same necessity has been perceived in the whole English-speaking world. Consequently, it is not surprising that nowadays many statutes are translated from Chinese to English, and, even if the translation is not binding, this also gives a little contribution to the role of law.
Now I'll direct the final question to Xialu. What is China's vision for the rule of law in the coming decades?
Yes, thanks for the question. China's rule of law is in the process of becoming more and more mature. China plans to put the rule of law largely in place for the country, the government and society by 2035. Here are some of the main goals. Part of strengthening the rule of law is improving the laws themselves. China will better implement the constitution by better conducting constitutional oversight. It will set up legislation in emergent fields such as artificial intelligence and big data, in which existing laws have been found to be inadequate. China will also steadily advance law-based government by making the government more streamlined, service-oriented, and accountable. It will also ensure strict and impartial administration of justice by improving systems to accelerate the development of the fair, efficient, and authoritative socialist judicial system. The goal is to see that the people feel justice has been served in each and every judicial case. This is important because judicial corruption still exists. President Xi has highlighted cases where some have got away with their crimes through bribery, with officials speaking on their behalf and green-lighting their conduct. China will also carry forward the best of its traditional legal culture as part of its efforts to build a law-based society. Many excellent ideas are worth passing on, such as enforcing public discipline through the application of both morality and the law and advocating harmony to reduce the need for lawsuits. By revisiting the wisdom of China's traditional legal culture, all Chinese people will be encouraged to truly revere, readily observe, and firmly defend the rule of law.
To sum up, under the rule of law, all people in a country, including lawmakers and leaders, are equally accountable to the same laws, with no one above the law. This is intended to promote stability and an orderly and just society. It's also fundamental to achieving many of China's goals, including economic and social progress, the protection of people's rights and freedoms, and international peace and security. Throughout this series, we'll be exploring topics related to President Xi and how governance is practiced in China. To stay up to date on the podcasts, visit the Beijing Review website, bjreview.com. Find us on YouTube or Spotify with the tag Beijing Review, or look for us where you get your podcasts. I'm Lu Yan in Beijing. Thanks for listening to the Governance Podcast. Bye for now.